Hey, listeners, it's episode 113 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. And today I sat down for the best conversation with my friend, Dr. Brittany Hollerbach. She's an associate scientist and deputy director at the Center for Fire Rescue and EMS Health Research, which is part of NDRI USA. She is working on studies examining the health of women firefighters, as well as a FEMA-funded study examining perceptions of protective strategies for COVID-19. She has an interest in firefighter health in general, and given her background as a former firefighter, specifically the translation and dissemination of health research. So Dr. Hellerbeck is a woman after my own heart. I know you're going to love this conversation. Please rate and review and share the podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive.
Oh my God. Podcast listeners, you are not going to believe who I am here with tonight. Guess, everyone guess. Okay, you messed it up. I am here with Dr. Brittany Hollerbach. Say hello to the podcast listeners, my friend.
Hello, everyone. I want everyone to know also that I'm waving at my screen and they cannot see me. They can only hear me.
I know, because, listen, the YouTube thing is just like too big of a barrier to entry for me. The video, I would have to do my hair. You look great, but I don't look great. So I would have to do my hair and it's just not going to happen.
No, I want everyone to know my hair is up in a bun on the top of my head. It's not, don't look great. Have my glasses on, not contacts, no makeup. Let's be real. So I like that about podcasts. I do.
Okay, I already have a weird off-the-wall question for you. Over your right shoulder, there is what
Over
is that?
My right shoulder is the Power Cat logo. It's ironwork, and it's the logo from where I went to college at Kansas State.
Oh, and does it say Hollerbach?
Yes, so underneath it, my mom got ironwork, and it says Dr. Hollerbach. The D looks like an O, and so it confused everyone because they're like, what does that say?
Yes, I was confused, but it is beautiful. I love that.
Thank you.
So I'm sure there's at least one person in the world who doesn't know who you are, but you were a mega famous researcher, firefighter, all the things. But can we dive back into the who the hell is Brittany Hollerbach, just for the one person that doesn't know you?
I love thinking that there's only one, but I have a feeling that perhaps there's a few that don't know me, which is good. So who am I? I am a former firefighter. I was a firefighter for 4 years in a town called Overland Park, which is where I'm from, the city I'm from. And I also worked at our regional fire academy, and I was like, okay, what's next? And how do we help the fire service? And so I originally went back to school. I went back to school a little later in life. I had taken some classes at community college, and I took my fire science classes, of course. And then I was just working at the fire academy and for the fire department. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I finally figured out that my goal actually was that I wanted to go to school and get a degree in exercise science and come back and teach physical fitness to our fire academy. Because I saw that as a missing piece. And when I entered the fire service, I was 120 pounds, 5'3.5", right? And so it's hard. The job is hard. So anyway, that was, I went back to school to get my degree in exercise science. And when I went to school, I learned that people were researching firefighters. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And so I think the fire service in me met the nerd in me, and I just got involved in research and learned that research can be more than just a microscope and a lab coat, and it can be out in the field and doing different exercise interventions, or different kinds of things. And then I was working with the fire service, and I thought, oh, this is really cool. So that's kind of my background. I also am a daughter, and I'm really close with my parents, and a sister, and a cat mama. We talked a little bit about my cat, and yeah, and a huge nerd. Definitely a nerd.
Oh my God. I love the nerds. And also, listeners, you have to understand, before we hit record, we were both singing the Lion King song together in pretty good harmony,
Yeah.
while Brittany was holding up her beautiful cat. So we're kind of a big deal.
I think AZ took some pictures, so hopefully that they might float around. Like, if I don't know how a podcast works, but if you can post like a picture, you may or may not be able to see my cat. We'll make that happen.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to definitely, on the podcast artwork, will be your face, but on all the promos, it will probably be your cat's face. It's going to be fine.
Did you hear that, babe? That's awesome.
Did you hear that? Oh my God. Okay. I have to know, before we get back to Kansas, because we're going to get back to Kansas, I have to know what sets your soul on fire.
I love that so much. Well, I think in the true sense of being a nerd, I have to say that firefighter research sets my soul on fire. And like, I understand that that's incredibly nerdy, but honestly, like, I feel like I'm a semi easy to please individual. Like, in my life, I feel like the priorities are like God and family and the fire service, meaning it fully encompassing like my job as well. So I really am very lucky to do what I do because I'm so passionate about the fire service, which I think comes from a place of being in the fire service, right? Like, once you're in, you're in. And even if, and this goes down kind of the research line, but even if you experience like discrimination and harassment in the fire service, overall, you still love the job of the fire service and you want to be a firefighter, even when you're treated like shit, which is ridiculous, and you shouldn't be treated like shit in the fire service. However, it shows just how much people love the job and want to be there. So that's what sets my soul on fire. And I think on the research side, doing stuff like this, like a podcast or writing, my passion is translation and dissemination of research. So how do you get it out? Right. Yes. How do you break it down? How do you get it out? Because the point isn't doing research like in an ivory tower with it not going anywhere. The point is changing policies, procedures, practices, the culture of the fire service so we get better.
Oh my God. It's one of my favorite things, translating the research. And I know you were not able to make our June 7-minute science, but you are so on our list for 7-minute science, girl.
I cannot wait. I cannot wait to do 7-minute science.
I'm so excited. All right. So, how are you, Dr. Brittany Hollerbach, changing the world?
Oof. You know, I hope that we're all changed. I think my initial reaction is to say, oh, it's just me. I'm not changing the world. Then I'm like, well, I think we're all changing the world. One small, like, act of human kindness at a time, or one small step at a time, one smile at a stranger at a time, those kinds of things. I think the way that I feel like perhaps at least I'm working towards changing the world. Who knows if it's happening, but I have to go back to, I think it's research and data and answering one question, one step at a time. I don't know how many listeners are like me, but I want to jump to the conclusion. I want to jump to the end point. Like, if I pick up a book, I read like the inside jacket and the first page, and like, then I flip to the back because I'm like, okay, but how does it, like, I don't want to, I kind of want to see what this is about, and then like maybe read a page in the middle and like, but what's at the end? And I feel like that in general, and I know I need to be better about that, and I'm working on my patience, but I feel like that's the thing, right? That's how you change the world, is like answer one question at a time and understand that you have to be patient and like answer the question ahead of you fully to understand like what the next question is.
I am blown away. I love that answer. Okay, before we get to your research, I wrote down 2 side notes we have to address. The first one is Kansas. So, you live in Kansas and you do research things in Kansas. Tell me more. Tell me more about this whole Kansas situation.
Well, so I don't know Dorothy. I've never seen the Yellow Brick Road. I don't have ruby slippers.
Damn it.
But in full like Kansas fashion, we were under a tornado warning this afternoon, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, is it going to be storming? And am I going to have power when we do this podcast? Like, I need my internet. I need to sign on to this link that she sent." And so I'm thinking, like, is there going to be a twister outside? But also in true Kansas fashion, like, I don't know how many of you have weather that's like, oh, what's it doing now? I don't know. Wait 5 minutes and it'll change. That's us. And so it was like blustery and humid, super windy, and then it just got more and more windy, and then we had like rain come through for like, I don't know, 30 minutes, and like heavy rain, and now it's sunny outside. So don't worry, we didn't get hit by a tornado today. But that's Kansas. So we have a small office in Kansas. Our NDRI, my research firm, started in New York, and it was National Development Research Institutes. And we got involved because the group of folks I work with were like a satellite office from the larger NDRI. And they were doing some firefighter research as well as military and some minority health disparities research. And one thing led to another, and they ended up kind of being like the whole NDRI situated out here in Kansas. So that's how there's like so it sort of made more sense when they were like in New York, and that sounds like, oh yeah, that's like where, like New York or California or, yeah, I don't know, a big city, like that's where you picture researchers at. And then there's us in this tiny little pocket in Kansas.
So is there anyone possibly that is a colleague of yours at NDRI that potentially the listeners may have ever heard of?
I can't imagine that anyone's ever heard of Dr. Sarah Jenke.
Probably not.
Probably not. Probably not. Kidding. I know everyone loves Sarah.
Just kidding. Okay. First of all, that whole description of your weather in Kansas is unfortunately going to be my new reality in Oklahoma.
Yes, you're going to be my neighbor.
I'm so excited. And we have to schedule a visit and get all of the things scheduled. But also at first I have to arrange for installation of a tornado shelter. I have been told this is important.
Yeah. So you'll be fine. You'll be fine. But
listen, the fire service, my beloved former coworkers, because I'm retired, I stopped by to grab some boxes for packing, and they said, "Can we see your new house?" And so I pulled up Zillow, and then by the time I got in my car and I was pulling away, they had all of these photographs, like photoshopped with Tornado Alley and then tornadoes on my house, and I'm like, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Did they put a yellow brick road in front of the house? Because you'll need that as well.
I'll need that. And girl, I am getting the ruby slippers, but I'm going to get them in the comfortable Rothys, just so you know.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
Because now
Brittany taught me about the Rothys.
You might as well be in Kansas. Yes. And so I feel like they may start sponsoring your podcast.
I sure hope so. Okay, before we go on to the research, I have one more question. When you and I were in College Station, Texas together, like 6 weeks ago, we went out to a beautiful lunch with Dr. Stephen Martin at this great like little airport hangar restaurant. And I parked the rental car next to a giant truck. And you said, you pick up the story now. Tell me what you said.
That's just like my truck.
That's just like my truck. Tiny women with giant trucks. Tell me, are you loving the truck?
I am loving the truck. And I think probably when we hung out, it was much closer to when I actually got the truck. And like, let's be real. If anyone on the call, I'm sure you guys have like, it wasn't a buyer's remorse, but it was like a sticker shock after the purchase. And so like, I'm sure y'all have that with big purchases where you're in the moment and you're like, yeah, I can totally do this. I can swing this payment. And then I don't know, do y'all wake up in the middle of the night, like having a panic attack because you're like, oh my God, what if I can't afford this? Like, what if? I mean, I think we do that with a lot of like the major decisions in our life. And so that was one of them where I thought like, oh my God, was this a responsible purchase? So thankful, if anyone's going through that currently, it does get better, and you just learn how to, budget in the payments and like live responsibly like an adult should. And so anyway, I am loving the truck so much. I went from an SUV, like a Ford Edge, so like a mid-size SUV, to the truck. And once you go up in size of vehicle, you can't go back down. Like you get in someone else's SUV and you're like, this is tiny. Like it's not tiny, it's an SUV, it's fine. But then you get it, like when you're used to being in a truck, like there's a lot of space in there. And I have the extended cab, right? There's lots of space. And someone asked me like, why did you get a truck? And so let's be clear, like I don't haul anything, I don't move anything, I don't work in construction. Like I haul myself around, and I just wanted the truck. Like, so honestly, I am just waiting for like the first person to ask me to help them move. And I'm sure it'll get old over time, but at first I'm like excited to put the thing to use. So, to anyone out there listening that lives anywhere near Kansas, like I will help you move. So AZ, I can help you move to Oklahoma.
Listen, I don't need help moving, but I'm going to need help going to the Farm and Fleet to get cow stall mats for my gym, and also the storm door at Home Depot.
All right.
Now, I've been planning to ask Jay Dawes, but also if you're willing.
He might live a little closer, but I mean,
he's 4 miles away.
Yeah, so there's that. He might be helpful. However, depending on how soon you move, I don't know if you'll be down there for the research symposium.
Tell me more. When is that?
So okay. It's in Tulsa. It's the IFS JLM Research Symposium, which is the International Journal of Fire Service Leadership and Management. So that's the journal that's in conjunction with FPP Publications and IFSTA Publications. And so IFSTA has their annual meeting down there in Tulsa, and IFS JLM does a combined like a research symposium leading up to the IFSTA meeting. So it's a great conference, and it occurs in July, I think right after the 4th.
Oh, I will be there.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, so I can help you move some mats and all that kind of stuff then.
Oh my God, can we meet up in Tulsa?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on down. Up, down? Is that up from here?
Across? Northwest.
Okay. All right, your geography is better than mine.
All right, so one more truck story before we get to the real stuff. I went to Georgia approximately 3 weeks ago to the Georgia Peer Fitness Trainer Symposium hosted by Bridget Melton. It was great at Georgia Southern University. I got to the airport. I went to the counter for my reserved car, and the lady said, we have 2 left. You can choose between a minivan and a truck. And I was like, give me the truck.
Obviously.
Now, it was a Ram something Warlock. Very fancy. But here's the thing. So I was driving around Dr. Mike Oldham from Texas A&M Commerce and his student. We were having so much fun. And I just realized that I am totally able to drive a big truck. Not a problem. It's the parking, because I have never had to actually fit into a space. When I drive a ladder truck, I park wherever the fuck I want to. Okay, I put out my outriggers, I put out cones, I do not have to fit in a space. It was a nightmare parking that stupid truck. Are you having this experience?
Yeah, so I've had the truck, like 6 months, 7 months, and I'm just now getting to the point where I can like whip in a parking space. And that's like going forward. Everyone who has a truck, they back it in. It's easier to back the truck in, but let's be real, whether it's me pulling in forward or backward, it is like a 10-point turn into the parking space. Like no, and let's be clear, it has all the cameras, like front cameras, rear cameras. It has the backup cam. People are like, oh yeah, just the backup cam, it's fine. No, when you're used to driving, like not using a camera, like you use your eyes, and then all of a sudden I have a camera, so now I'm like looking at 12 things, the camera and my blind spots. And so yeah, I totally feel you. The parking the truck thing is,
yeah,
I'm getting
I drove that thing like a badass.
Yeah.
The parking, it was embarrassing.
Yes.
I was embarrassed for myself.
Yes. Yep. I usually sit in there for a minute after I park, like maybe
Sweating?
the people that saw me will like leave or go in or go out of wherever we are. Like I'll wait and maybe they won't see me.
Okay, girl. I'm so glad you said that. Okay. We have talked a lot about ridiculous but very important stuff. But now I want to get to your research. Now, I, as a female firefighter, participated in, I think, at least 2 of your research studies. At least 2. I know. I got the coolest little swag from yeah, it was amazing.
That's awesome.
But I want to give you a chance to actually, first of all, pick, because I know you have a variety of research studies, but which one would you like to talk about first?
I think perhaps like women's health and reproductive health.
Yes. Let's do it.
Okay, let's go.
Tell me about the study.
All right. Well, so there's been multiple studies, and you mentioned participating in some. I don't know if you participated in these, but we did. We've done a lot of work with Dr. Jeff Burgess out of the University of Arizona, and there's one study we did with his group, and well, even prior to that, let's start with, we did research with over 2,000 women in the fire service, and we did survey work. So we had these women fill out, they were so patient, filled out super long survey. We asked about everything, about injury and about discrimination and harassment on the job and the perception of the job, like job satisfaction. And that's how we found that women loved their job. And it was a subsequent study that looked at discrimination and harassment, and even being discriminated and harassed against, they still loved their job. But that's a separate topic. So that was one of the first studies that we did. And then we also asked about number of pregnancies while in the fire service, and if women had struggled with conceiving and or giving birth in the fire service. And what we found was that rates of miscarriage among women in the fire service were about 2.5 times more likely than for the general public, right? So women in the general population carry about a 10% risk of miscarriage, whereas women in the fire service, there's like a 22 to 32% risk of miscarriage for women. Yeah, it just, which is crazy. And, you know, I think that, so let me preface this by saying I don't have kids or a significant other. So, you know, I am not somebody that has really thought about having kids. And so reproductive health was not like on my radar. And then we started talking about it, and I'm like, I don't know if that, like, how interesting is that to me to study as a topic? And when I got into studying it a little bit, I thought, my God, this is insane. Like, first of all, I don't think we, being women in the fire service, even knew that it was an issue, like even like 5 or 10 years ago. And even now you talk to different women in the fire service, and I think a lot of them don't know, or you don't know, like you, sometimes we don't even think about, so what I mean is, you don't even know, like, how long should I stay on the truck if I'm pregnant, right? So we know that our gear protects us from a lot of carcinogens. We know how to decon in the fire service, and there's a big focus on preventing cancer. And yet, I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know. I didn't, and still am learning about what is happening with a growing fetus inside your body and what impacts that fetus and what's going on in the first trimester. Like, there's so much growth and development. And I think often the first trimester is also like, you don't even tell people that you're pregnant yet because there's so much going on, right? And so I think there's a hard this line that we walk. Like, I don't know if I want to tell people in the fire service that I'm pregnant, and yet should I still be on the line, or should I be modifying my duty? And so there's all these questions. So that was one thing that was really interesting to me. And then I think also very meaningful. So when you start talking to people in the fire service and they're like, oh my God, I didn't realize, like, I've had trouble conceiving, or I've had a miscarriage, or, and they didn't realize that it could be, not always, but it could be related to their occupation. And so to me, it's really important then to continue to study that topic and try to figure out the why behind what's going on, and how do we prevent it or make it more safe for women in the fire service to be able to have kids. So, yeah.
And so you mentioned that the miscarriage rate is about 2.5% higher in the fire service than it is in the general population. Is there any data to this point on why?
Yeah. So at this point, and it's not a great answer because there's a lot of things that impact hormones and your body. It's so it, but so like the convoluted answer is yes, and then you list all these things, right? So shift work, working just a weird shift, can disrupt your circadian rhythm as well as your hormones, which can throw off your ability to conceive. Also, so shift work, but also how much sleep you're getting. So even and so those are two confounding things. Like, short sleep, even if you work a 9 to 5, if you're getting poor sleep or short sleep at night, that can impact your fertility. But so can shift work, even if you're getting like a standard 8 hours of sleep. Like, throwing off your body's rhythms can also impact. So then think about if you're short slept and you're on shift work. Okay. But also heat, the extreme physiologic response to the job. So like your heart racing because a call comes in and the tones go off and they're really loud. Also the emotional stress of the job can impact your hormones and what's going on in your body. And then there's noise. Who knew that loud noises can impact lots of things that are going on physiologically in your body and can impact your hormone regulation and, again, fertility. Let's see what else. Oh, and then of course the toxic environment that we work in, right? And so there's lots of things that our gear protects us against, but only to a certain point. Like, there's chemicals that are so incredibly small that can either get through the gear, or as you're taking your gear off, you can become contaminated. And, that goes back to the cancer in the fire service. And so how important it is to wear clean gear and not leave your hood around your neck, and, take that stuff off and decon and clean your gear on a regular basis. So it's a convoluted answer because there's a lot of different things. It's not like you can point to one thing and say, oh, that's what it is. If you could avoid doing that, then you're good, and then the weight of our gear, right? Like, so bending, crouching, physical activity, extreme when you're carrying extreme weight, that can impact a growing baby. And so there's lots of things.
Oh my goodness. There are so many things to think about. And from your research and maybe any other research that you're familiar with, are there any best practice recommendations yet?
Yeah, so it's a wonderful question. So I think the first place to start is being as educated as possible, knowing starting with like the NFPA job tasks, right? What am I responsible for doing as a firefighter? And then clearly communicating that to your doctor, your healthcare provider. So if you're in the stage where you're just wanting to become pregnant and you're talking about fertility and like, how do we improve fertility? For example, I mentioned Jeff Burgess and his group out of Arizona, and they did a study on AMH, which is anti-Müllerian hormone. And so it's a measure of ovarian reserve, which in general is a measure of your fertility. And so it kind of increases up until about age 25, and then it starts to decrease until you hit menopause, when in theory it should be about 0, meaning that you're no longer producing eggs. So they found that AMH is about 33% lower in firefighters compared to the general public. So again, it's just one hormone that can be impacted by the career. And again, that could be chemical exposure, but it could also be shift work and heat and the physiologic response and all the things we talked about. So back to best practices, I think it's important to communicate those things to your doctor, because from what I've heard from a lot of women, they go in, they ask their OBGYN, like, okay, I'm pregnant. Like, how should I restrict my duties? Should I stay on the line? How long can I stay on the line? And there are a lot of doctors that are occupationally knowledgeable, we'll say. But I think more often than not, they don't really know the job of a firefighter and what all that entails. And so I think it's really worth your time to take some kind of document. We created a document to take to your OBGYN. It has the NFPA 1582 job tasks on it, as well as some of the risks that we just talked about, the heat, the noise, the physiologic response to the job, etc. And so you can just kind of talk through some of those things. And so you're educating your provider and allowing your provider to educate you. And at the end of the day, I don't think there's any like, you should come off the line at this time, or you should tell your department at this time. I think it's case by case. But I think the best we can do is educate folks so that they feel empowered to make the right decision about those things.
I am fascinated by all of that. And I want to go on a tangent for just a second. I had a lunch with a former coworker yesterday, and we were talking about fertility. This is a male. And he said, I think it was 14, 15 years ago, when he and his wife were trying to conceive, they were having trouble. And he indicated to his doctor, like, hey, I'm a firefighter. Is this hot, heavy gear? Is this becoming a problem? And then the doctor was like, no, absolutely not. That's not it. Here's my actual question. As someone, a fellow, let's educate the fire service. Let's educate everyone about the fire service. How do we better communicate those job tasks to our practitioners so they understand?
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So, two answers. First of all, male reproductive health is absolutely impacted by a job in the fire service. And I mean, for a lot of the things we talked about earlier, right? Like heat, for example, the male reproductive system is also impacted by heat. They're exposed to extreme heat, just like women would be. They're exposed to fully encapsulating gear and the chemical exposure and, the other things. So they're not immune to that. And studies have found that male reproductive health is impacted. There was a study out of Denmark that found that males were 46% more likely to experience male factor infertility. So the job of a firefighter for a man impacted their couple's fertility chances. And we found that, as a man ages, his semen ages. And so there are several factors that go along with that. And it can be like volume, concentration, motility, how well it moves around, and then total sperm count. And we found that research with firefighters has found that men tend to have lower semen parameters than the general population, right? So that obviously can impact your ability to conceive. Now, in answer to the actual question, which was how do we make providers more aware, we have some documents on the Science Alliance. So we have this organization that Dr. Jenke started called Science Alliance, Science to the Station, a Health and Wellness Alliance. Now, the website is science-alliance.org. You can go there and find lots of things. It can be a bit overwhelming, but there are wonderful reproductive health resources. And in fact, there are wonderful health resources in general. And there's a document, a guide, physician's guide to healthcare practices or something. And I'm butchering the name. But the point is, you can go and find documents that you can take to your healthcare provider, and that might help kind of spark a conversation. If you don't know what to say, or you're like, yeah, I'm a firefighter, do you think this impacts me? And they're like, nope, you're good. Like, here's a little, like, not that you want to like argue with anyone, but just you could say, hey, like, here's some things that the NFPA, for example, says that a firefighter does. Like, here's some of the general tasks. And it talks a little bit about, your risk for cardiovascular disease and perhaps some cancers that you might screen for a little earlier in a firefighter than in the general population. And similar to with reproductive health, right, is that, okay, if you're struggling with fertility issues, you may, think through all of the things that a firefighter does. And perhaps, so I think, yeah, these guides that we have online are very helpful. You can print them out, take them to your doctor, show them on your phone, and I really do think that kind of helps spark a conversation. So you go in, like, I know if I don't prepare for things like that, I feel like I don't have anything to say, or like I don't even know how to ask the right questions, if that makes sense. So I think it's just helpful to have like the right words, or like, just a little spark to kind of start that conversation.
Listeners, I will put that link in the show notes because it's such a good website. I can't even tell you how good it is. So amazing.
That's
All
Dr.
right.
Sarah Jenkins' like love child. You guys, we talked about what we were going to name the website and the organization of like Science to the Station for months and months. And I told you earlier that I'm a very impatient person, and I'm just like, whatever, it doesn't matter what you call it, just name it, just name it, just name it. And at one point, Sarah looked at me and she was like, Brittany, it's like naming a child. You can't rush these things. I don't have any kids. I'm like, dude, just name, like, who cares? People always go by nicknames anyway. It does not matter. Like, and she just looked at me like, oh, it does matter. You don't understand. And I was like, no, I don't. But I will try to be patient while we figure this out.
All right, another side question. Dr. Janky is a hugger. I am a hugger. Are you a hugger? You're not, are you?
No, I'm not. I think I stand very awkwardly when people try to hug me. Yeah, no, I probably not. Sarah's also the person that, like, you could be really tired. Let's say, like, coming back from a conference, right? You could be, like, super exhausted, and you get on a plane, and then she sits down and, like, immediately starts talking to the person next to her. I get on a plane. You know these people that have that face, like the do not talk to me face. That's the face I have. Nobody talks to me. And I have my earbuds in, and I, like, put my head on the window, and my eyes are shut. Like, Sarah could be like, oh, I don't really feel like talking to anyone. I'm so tired. Get on the plane. Immediately she's friends with her entire row. Not me.
I saw a meme one time, like my husband and I sat separately. I put my headphones in and like didn't talk to anyone, and he is now in someone else's wedding in Europe.
Yes. That's Sarah.
I am between the two of you. I am a hugger, but I ain't nobody talking to anyone on an airplane. It's not happening.
That's awesome.
All right. So we talked about your research in women's health and reproductive health, which is amazing. We hit on some tips for men's reproductive health. Words are so hard.
They are.
But I know, girlfriend has more research to talk about. What do you want to talk about next?
So I think we might talk a little bit about COVID. And I say that because that's going to make everyone freak out. And no one wants to talk about COVID anymore. And I don't either. But I have a study that is funded by FEMA. And we're looking at really about like the impact of COVID on the fire service. And I think you and I, at the top of this, we talked about how important translation and dissemination of research are. And that's what my research is looking at, is like how did we do with messaging during the pandemic? And like, let's be real, though everybody sucked at messaging during the pandemic, like the federal government, public health agencies, but fire departments are divided. Some, like, I think shied away from putting out too much information or from changing guidance. But what it seems that firefighters wanted was a reason for why the guidance is changing. Because let's be real, the guidance was constantly changing. And people took that as, nobody knows what the F they're doing. This is ridiculous. Why today I need a mask? Yesterday I didn't need a mask, or I need a mask, but then we can all take our masks off and eat together at the kitchen table. Like, what then is the point of me wearing my mask all day, every day at the station? And so I think what I found through my research on COVID is that if fire departments would just share the reason to why we're changing this guidance, there was a lot of departments that did that. They would do literally like every day. So every shift would have a briefing, and whether that was like via email or they would have a call in the morning. A lot of them started to use this technology like Zoom so that they could do like a command staff briefing, even if command staff wasn't like going and individually visiting stations. So my point is how great communication can be, and how a lot of that has to be set up like prior to an emergency, right? It's like doing our ICS training. We know that we need that prior to being in an emergency, right? Like all of a sudden we can't be figuring out our command structure when like you just need to know. So that has been really interesting to me. And it's so funny because I went to a conference and I was presenting on COVID. And so naturally, like we went out for some drinks the night before the presentation. And so I'm like, just minding my own business, hanging out with some friends. And we start talking to some folks who are going to be at the conference the next day. And they're like, oh yeah, what are you, like, what's your name? And I said my name. They're like, oh, you're the COVID girl. And I'm like,
oh no.
oh, yeah, right. Like, because I get it. Nobody wants to talk about COVID. And it's so funny. I'm like, the thing I don't want to lose is the lessons learned during. I don't want to go back to a place where we don't talk about our stockpile of supplies, right? Like, I don't want folks to run out of PPE. I don't want us to think that all those masks that we have are just going to be good. And then in 3 years, we pull them out and realize like, oh, the straps are falling off or they're moldy depending on where they were stored or, whatever it is. So I definitely think that it's so important to like build on lessons learned. And so that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. Though it's super funny is this being the COVID researcher, because I'm like, there's a lot going on there that I don't want to lose.
And in that COVID research, does that sort of, how can I say this? Move into other communication within the fire department? Meaning, if we communicate well about things like COVID, we also communicate well about things like whatever.
Absolutely. Like, I'm so glad you asked that. And I am so interested in take exactly what you said, figuring out how not only do we communicate with our folks, because I think that's huge, is explaining like why, whatever it is, why it's changing, and how do we communicate that with our folks. And I think that goes along with anything else, right? When we talk about cancer, we can explain that cancer is prevalent among firefighters, and that's why we're changing station design, we're changing bunker gear, we're changing our decon processes, right? But people can get on board with that because they understand the why, and you can see the research behind it. So I think communications about infectious disease should be the same. But I'm also interested in learning about that communication and how we can use firefighters to communicate better with the public. So that's one of my huge things, is kind of that community risk reduction. And some departments and some firefighters are really like pro community risk reduction. They want to get out into the community and be involved in that. And some people I think are quite a bit more reticent to embrace community risk reduction, and they don't see it as a part of their job as a firefighter. Like, I know we want to be fighting house fires, but when we're not, I feel like we could take a little bit of time and like communicate with the public. And I think it'll make our jobs easier. I think, let's figure out who's in our community. What language do they speak? What traditions, what customs do they have? Like, can I be more culturally sensitive or culturally appropriate when I address folks in my community? And do we represent the community? Like when we go out into the community, I love that there are some fire departments that will wear like their local high schools t-shirt on like a Friday night and support the school and the district and the football team, and right. Like, but it's just, you go out in the community and people are like, oh, like the back of their shirt says fire, but the front is the local high school. Like, I love that. And so I think, it makes me so excited to think about how communication, not only in and within our department and amongst departments, and then like the department communicating with public health and with the government, and like that's all important as well. But then also the flip side is, how does that communication trickle down to the public and impact our relationships with the public, and also the public's health and safety, of course.
So is that something that you are either teaching now or is on the horizon for Dr. Hollerbach to be teaching in the future?
I would love to do a presentation on it, to teach on it. I think I'm at the phase where I'm trying to figure out what the appropriate next step is, and is it writing a grant, and what's the grant idea, and how do you get involved with the community, and then like what do you measure? Is it a study where you look at how effective X communication is, right? Like how do you integrate the firefighter or the fire department and the public? There's folks called community health workers. Can you integrate a community health worker in a fire department? Can you train a firefighter to be a community health worker? If you do, what does that look like? And how do you integrate that into the public? And then is the public even receptive to a firefighter being a community health worker? Like often community health workers are this, like, they're well integrated into the community. They speak the same language as the community. Like, does the fire department have the capacity to do that? And so, yes, I'm incredibly excited about this. And yet I have zero idea what direction that's going in.
Okay. Respectfully, may I suggest when we meet up in Tulsa, we will have a nice dinner, potentially a margarita or some other beverage, and we will hammer it out.
Yes, that sounds phenomenal. I love that.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right. Do you have time to talk about one more direction of your research if you care to?
Yeah. What do I want to talk about now? Oh, there's so many ways that we could go.
I know.
So I do have to, so I was going to say I want to talk a little bit about cancer, and we've talked a little bit about cancer, but I also have to say that I know earlier we mentioned a little bit about the discrimination and harassment piece and how that can impact job satisfaction. So perhaps it would be worth our time to talk a little bit about that. And so we did some work again with women firefighters and asked them about their experiences in the fire service, and specific to like, have you experienced and there's on the survey, there's like a list of things, and so like verbal and written harassment, yeah. And then the thing that really caught me off guard was that 5% of our sample had experienced assaults in the fire service, like amongst coworkers, not with civilians, because absolutely violence toward first responders can happen. But like in the fire department with my colleagues, with their colleagues, 5% of our sample, we had like over 2,000 people. So like that's way too many people that have experienced assault in the fire service. The fire service is a brother and sisterhood. It is a community. It is your family. Like what is it? Like there's 3 things that you do most in life. Like one is work and one is sleep. And so at work, like, anyway, okay. So that was one of the huge findings for me, was that like, and this is still happening, right? Like this is a study that Sarah and her colleagues published in 2018, right? So the research was probably collected between 2014 and 2016 to be conservative, but like we should not still be finding that's happening, and it is. But when you ask women about discrimination, harassment in the fire service, like, yes, it's still occurring. What also is very meaningful is that it is impacting health. So often when we talk about discrimination, harassment, you get that's an HR issue, or it's, it's not a health and safety issue. But I think it is a health and safety issue. So what we've seen is that if you look at rates of discrimination harassment, so let's put folks in 3 groups. Low frequency, meaning either it didn't happen or it happened very infrequently. Medium frequency, so yeah, you experienced some discrimination and harassment at work. Or high frequency, it was pervasive. I experienced a lot of extreme discrimination and harassment. Okay, well, if you look at those 3 groups, you can see physical injury rates increase as discrimination and harassment increases. You can see rates of anxiety, depression, and PTSD all increase as discrimination and harassment increases. What is interesting to me is your health it takes a toll on your health, physical health and mental health. And yet, when you ask women, are you happy with your choice to be a firefighter? That does not change depending on how much discrimination, harassment they've received, low, medium, high. Where you do see a change is when you ask them, would you recommend the job of a firefighter to another woman? That's when you see the rates start to decrease. And so, I mean, I think it's very pertinent to talk about when the fire service is facing this unprecedented labor shortage. We can't get folks who want to be a firefighter. And then fire departments are asking, where's all the women? Where's all the diversity? Like, I'm trying to make my department more diverse, but they don't want to come. But what does the culture of your fire department look like, right? What are you offering them as benefits when they come in? What's your selling point? What's your reproductive health policy? Do you have a reproductive health policy? What's your maternity leave policy? And then what's the culture of your department? Like, what are other women telling other women, or even men, right? Like, what are men telling their women friends? Like, yeah, hey, come work for my department. You love it. Or like, oh, no, this really is probably not the place for you, right? Like, I think that says a lot.
I think it was 2022, almost 100% sure. It was 2022. I was presenting at the Women in Fire conference in Orlando, and there was a really nice gentleman there. He was a captain at some small-ish department on the East Coast. I want to say one of the Carolinas. And he was there specifically, oh my goodness, excuse me, specifically to recruit women. And so he's talking to me, and I'm like, bro, I'm retiring in 2 years. Like, I have no interest in working for your department. And he said, yeah, but you only have to do 10 years. You get a pension, whatever. I said, let me ask you about this. You're here recruiting. How's your retention? And he said, terrible. Right? Right. We got to solve the upstream problems.
Right.
Wow. I was speechless. You're speechless. Everyone's speechless.
Right. Like, mic drop. That was, and that's not the thing that I really want to have the mic drop on. I want to have the mic drop on, like, oh, this is the best solution. That should be the mic drop moment. But like, when it blows my mind that, we can't kind of proactively begin to solve these things, or, and I know that it's hard to look within ourselves or within our department at our internal problems. It's easier to look externally and say, okay, but how do we change for the recruits coming in, or what's wrong with the recruit pool that they don't want to work for us, rather than what's wrong with us that they don't want to work here. But I mean, I get it. I know it's hard for departments. It's hard for us as humans to look within at what's going on. But I think that that's kind of the key, especially, and and I think also the fire service hasn't had to do that. We used to have wait lists out that
wazoo.
Thank you. Yeah, I was censoring myself there. But right, like, so the fire service is one of those jobs that really has never had to try that hard at recruitment. Like, we just had folks banging down the door. I mean, that's how it was when I worked at our fire academy. We had to interview people to get into a college class that they had to pay for in order to get, like, we took them through Fire 1 and 2, and they got their certification and all this stuff. But I mean, people had to pay for this class, and they had an interview process to get in because the wait list was so long. And now it's not like that. I mean, not in fire academies, not in departments. Like, there are some departments that have wait lists, but that's part of it too, is like, let's look at those as these best case scenarios, shine a light on them. What are they doing right that they do have a wait list? What does that department look like? What does the culture look like? Because I think for the most part, we're not improving enough within to want to either get people to stay or to get new folks to come on.
I wish I had a photographic memory, because I want to repeat those exact words you just said. And then we could drop the mic.
Yes.
But it was something about, let's look at those departments that do have a wait list, and let's find out, what are they doing? What is their culture? How are they treating their new people? What do I need to add?
Yes, exactly. No, exactly. Like, what does our culture look like? What policies and procedures do we have? What are folks within our department saying? What are other departments saying about us?
Yes.
What does our social media look like? What does our community interactions look like? What is all the things? Like, What are they doing right? What does their recruitment and retention look like? How long have folks been on the department? How many people leave the department every year? Like, what does that look like compared to other departments across the nation or even in that area?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I am going to listen, girl. I'm going to farm you out as a consultant to all of these departments that are having trouble with recruitment and retention. Okay.
I feel like I could ask them a bunch of questions, but like I don't have the answer. I don't know what the answer is, but I'll ask you a bunch of questions and maybe get you thinking about what it is.
No, you have the giant mirror and you're going to like shine it back on
them. That's what it is.
I wish I had. I was trying to hit the screenshot while we were doing that, but it didn't work. Oh. All right. So I try to keep these because you know, firefighters have monkey mind, squirrel brains. I try to keep these under an hour. So I want to give you a chance. I know you don't have a dog, so I'm not going to ask you about your dog. But I want to give you a chance to sort of, if you have parting words of wisdom to share with the fire service, the mic is now yours.
Oof. That's a lot. So we're almost at the top of the hour, so I'll keep it short. I think more than anything, the best thing to do is to get involved, whatever that looks like for you. Research, advocacy, listen to podcasts, get on podcasts, check out the Science Alliance, right? Follow AZ on Fire Rescue Wellness, like get involved with the organizations, know what the NFPA is doing and how standards are changing, know what the FRCE is doing and what education they're pushing out, know what the NFFF is saying, know what the USFA is doing, right? There's going to be a women's weekend at the National Fire Academy coming up in, not October. Okay, there's going to be a women's weekend at the National
Fire month that
right?
Doesn't start with October.
We're having our Science Alliance conference, Science to the Station, at the National Fire Academy. That actually is in October. That's why I think October was in my brain. But it's going to be in conjunction with the USFA Fire Summit. And so the Fire Administrator Summit will be on like Tuesday the 8th. Our conference will run the 4th through the 6th. There will be plenty of time for meetings in between, so you can catch both the conference and the USFA Fire Summit. Both of them will be awesome. But my point is, get involved. Go to conferences, large or small, national, regional, local. But get involved and ask questions. Like that's how researchers, I don't want to answer my own questions. I want to answer the questions that the fire service has. And I can't do that unless I'm out networking with the fire service and asking what they need, right? It's about you. It's about the fire service. And so how do we make the fire service better collectively? And that's on you. That's on you to get involved and ask the questions and let us know as researchers how we can make it better.
It's also on you to register for 7-Minute Science because Brittany has agreed to be a presenter coming up. Undetermined date. Register.
You heard it. You heard it here first. 7-Minute Science, y'all. Sign up for it.
You heard it here first. Also, the replays. Dr. Sarah Janke is on the replay. So if you haven't seen the replay, you probably better reach out to me and I'll send it to you. That's all I can say.
Because first of all, Dr. Janke is incredibly knowledgeable, but she's also hilarious. So you gotta catch the replay.
She is amazing. I want to be as funny as Sarah, and it's never gonna happen.
I know. I think I try, and I'm like, I know I'm not. I know, something like in a lecture, in a speaking situation, and I know I'll say something that like she had said, but she said it better, and I'll say it, and I'm like, oh, the room's still quiet. Okay, keep talking.
All right. When we have dinner in Tulsa, we will also add to the agenda how to be funny like Sarah. We'll figure it out. I love that.
Sarah's gonna be there, so we can pull her in and ask her how to be funny like Sarah.
Oh my God, it's like a master class.
Yes.
I love it. Okay. Listeners, you have just heard almost 1 hour from the amazing Dr. Brittany Hollerbach. I am so happy to have had her on the podcast. And I think, are you ready to drop the mic? We're dropping the mic. AZ, and Brittany are officially out.